Welcome to the podcast. It's Tuesday. We're going to talk some NASCAR with Rod Mullins. And Rod, on Sunday, Brickyard 400 had a interesting finish with some excitement towards the end, overtime finish, lots of back and forth there. And a guy who ran already this season at Indy did not get a win. There were rain issues that kept Kyle Larson from doing the double on Memorial Day weekend, but Larson emerges as the big winner on the Brickyard 400. So tell us how that all happened.
Well, it all just kind of came into being of where they had good weather. We can say that out of the way because you mentioned Kyle Larson going and doing the double that weekend of Memorial Day weekend. He didn't get a chance to even get in the car when he got into Charlotte because it was rained out at that point. So this was a chance for him to kind of prove the naysayers that he knew Indianapolis but couldn't win Indianapolis. But then yet Hendrick Motorsports, the way that they were able to put everything together, they came up with a win. And, a lot of people are saying that Kyle Larson wasn't the real winner of the race. It was Brad Keselowski because Brad Keselowski was still out there running before he had to finally pit. They'd gone into extra overtime, let's put it that way. He said in a tweet, I think he told somebody or told some people that he was the real winner, at least for the time being and everything of where it had kind of, how can I say this? Well, had to do with the fact of running there at the top and then having to go in and pit because of, guess what? Gas. That's the reason why he had to go in and get gas. And people were already amazed at 50 or 60 some laps. I think 60 some laps of what he'd been able to accomplish, but then he had to go in and pit. And then when that happened, Kyle Larson moved up beside of Ryan Blaney. Well, that's what I would automatically think is going to happen. The car drops off the pace and then goes to the pits, and then you have the next car that's right behind that driver move up. And Ryan Blaney was not upset at Kyle Larson per se, but he was upset at the situation because he felt like he had a good chance to win that race. And he said it sucked. He said it kind of had it taken away from him. And Kyle Larson ended up having a better car to hang out there toward the end of it.
So yeah, he gets I don't know if it kind of closes the story. I mean, the talk of the spring was him trying to do the double and
Right.
all the practice he had there leading up to the Indy 500, and so now he's got wins in three of the four, I guess, crown jewel races, everything but Daytona in his career, does Kyle Larson. And so in that sense, I mean, big win for him, big win for the team. And you mentioned, what a bummer for Brad Keselowski. Not just him though. The guys caught up in that big crash there in the first overtime, I guess that stopped the race for a good little
Right.
while there.
Yeah.
And for those of us who were watching late, got a little confused too. The TV went from NBC to USA, and if I actually had the volume down. I was watching two TVs, had the volume down, and all of a sudden my local news was on. So I'm like, what the
Yeah.
heck? I don't think the race ended. What are they doing here? It was kind of like the Hailie movie game.
Uh,
So
That's what I was getting ready to say. It was the Hailie movie all over for NASCAR on Sunday because, automatically at the beginning, we got the news that Joe Biden was not going to be running again, was not going to be a candidate. And that preempted NBC's coverage on the pre-race ceremony. So that got bumped over to USA. I'm sitting there and I'm like, what in the heck's going on here? As I'm trying to watch the beginning part of that, and then the special news report comes on. And then we go through the race, and then right before the end of the race, we have 30 seconds of blackness just come across the screen. Nobody can explain it. It just happened. And then almost immediately after that, we're going into overtime. I just want to tell you guys that for the finish of the race, we're going to switch over to USA. And I was like, no, we can't switch over to USA. There's no sense in switching over to USA. And they did. They switched over to USA and finished the race up. But they felt like, I think NBC felt like that it was important that the local stations get on because, especially with the announcement of President Biden saying he's not going to continue his run for reelection and so forth, they thought that was probably the most important thing of the entire day. But let's look at it this way. They had great ratings. They improved on what they had from previous outings. In the last time that they ran the Roval altogether, the oval, I should say, was back in 2020. They've ran the inside road course here for the last 3 years up until this year, where they returned back to the oval itself. So there we go. I mean, people were wanting to see it, but couldn't prove that by the crowd looking at it. And you and I were talking about this before we went on.
Yeah. What's going on there? It's I was in and out because of the
Mhm.
the other job I've got covering politics news for Augusta Free Press. So that was the reason I was watching two TVs and had the volume more on the politics part of it.
Mhm.
And but whenever I would look and see the crowd shots from Indy, boy, there were lots of empty seats, and you noted how there were flags and tarping and things like that in
Yep.
areas too. So I mean, yeah, the tickets didn't move.
Yeah, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why, unless, of course, I wasn't there or anything. I was there for the first one. 30 years ago, I was there for the first one. Got special. I got a pass to be able to go. My wife and I went. I enjoyed myself thoroughly. I mean, it was jam packed in there. Everybody that you could possibly cram into Indianapolis Motor Speedway, they had them there. If it wasn't there in the stands, it was in the infield. People were wanting to watch this race, and it seems like over time this race has not received, I guess, its due importance. I think it should be treated like it's a crown jewel of racing. I think the same way that you treat a Daytona, the same way you treat a Charlotte, it needs to be treated more of a crown jewel and a very important race on the circuit. Whether that means moving it to a playoff time, I don't know. But somebody needs to come up with something. I'm sure Roger Penske's scratching his head because they were wondering about this, of whether or not they were going to have enough people. They were hoping that the 30th anniversary stuff the mystique would be on it a little bit and it would kind of carry over, but it didn't show up on Sunday.
So back to the race, Denny Hamlin won the first stage. He got caught up in that big wreck towards the end there. Bubba Wallace took the second stage. That was his first stage
Yeah.
win in a couple of years. He finished fifth in the race. A good finish for Wallace. He's still though
Mm-hmm.
he's right there on the edge of the playoffs. It's one of the bigger names that's still got uncertainty. We got a 2 week break coming up
Mm-hmm.
with the Olympics and NBC with the TV contract for the second part of the season, and they forced the break for NASCAR for these next 2 weeks. But Wallace is among several drivers who need to do some work in those last four races before the playoff cutoff.
Yeah, and he came from really back behind the cutoff line. If it was to end on Sunday,
Yeah.
he was there behind the cutoff line. It was not looking good for him. And then suddenly, here he is. He finishes fifth, like you said, and does really well and gets above the cutoff.
Yeah.
And now he just, like you said, he needs a win. He needs something to get out here and prove, hey, I can make the playoffs and we can make a run deep into the playoffs if we get a chance. The Some of the other drivers that I felt really bad for on Sunday afternoon, and we go again to none other than Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch was running good, had a good finish, just about ready to put in the books. He was running as high as fifth at one point, and then he gets caught up in an accident, something that happens there at the end of the race, and I think he apologized really quickly for what had happened. He apologized to the team and so forth. But that's the second or third time here in as many weeks as he has been caught up in something and then has been relegated back in the rest of the finishing order. And although he finished, I'm looking at the finishing order. He finished 25th. He got back out on the track, but it's still not enough for him to be able to get out there and close that playoff gap. But he still needs, more than anything else, he still needs a win if he's going to be able to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, we're still where we were with Larson winning. That was his fourth win of the season. So we're still at
Right.
12 winners this season. With four races to go, we now know it's certain that if there is a new winner, they're going to, if we have four new winners, I guess we could say
Right.
in the next four races, which could happen, I suppose. Each of those would certainly qualify for the playoffs. That group includes, I mean, right now on the positive side of the cutoff line, Martin Truex Jr., Ty Gibbs, Chris Buescher, Ross Chastain. You talked about Bubba Wallace. Chase Briscoe is in this mix. Kyle Busch is right now in 19th. Todd Gilliland, Michael McDowell, that might be pushing it. That's all the way down to 21st. So we're talking
Hmm.
about that'd be about 9 guys
Yeah.
for 4 spots. And then of course there could be a wild card, somebody from below there.
Hmm.
Ricky Stenhouse Jr. right now is in 25th. He's a guy who's been pretty competitive off and on this season.
Yeah.
Somebody from outside that group of 9 we just talked about gets a win. They win, they're in.
Well, and you really can't rule out somebody along the line of a Carson Hocevar, somebody along that line of a, who knows? I mean, Josh Berry could come up with a, win out of this whole thing and stuff. That team's improving, although that team's getting ready to separate here at the end of the year, and he's going to be going over to the Wood Brothers. Yeah, there's a lot of good quality drivers in there still that haven't, posted a win this year, but have been knocking on the door. Noah Gragson is another one. I mean, he's one right there that could be looking at the possibility of making the playoffs, and especially in the last year of Stewart-Haas Racing. But, it's all of this is just up in the air right now. It's going to be up in the air, and we're going to be on the edge of our seat going through the end of through August into the end of August before the playoffs really start.
Some off the track news we wanted to talk about. First, Cole Custer. Some news
Mhm.
about him. He was the 2020 Cup Series Rookie of the Year, driving the last couple of years in the Xfinity Series. What's the latest with Cole Custer?
Well, Cole Custer is going to be moving, they think, up to there. At least they've expressed the interest in getting him up there to the Cup Series. He was in the Cup Series in Xfinity. Now thinking about coming back and running in Cup, and he will do that if he does under the factory arm of Haas Racing, and that's under Carl Haas. And so when you had Stewart-Haas Racing, the Stewart part is going away completely, but Carl Haas is not going to give up anything of what he's got right there. He's going to still stay into racing, and he feels like Cole Custer is the man that he wants there in that seat. Interestingly enough, it seems like they're wanting another driver too, and that's to fill out the Xfinity Series, and that could very well be Hailie Deegan, who lost her ride here just a couple of weeks ago. She is being looked at right now by Haas Racing, and also I think there's some things in there being talked to by Junior Motorsports. Who knows? But she has not really quit racing. I know she raced, I think, this past weekend or a couple of weekends ago at Lime Rock in a race and finished sixth, I think, in that race. And so she's looking for another ride. And so possibility there, she could be going into the Xfinity Cup ride for Haas Racing for next year. That is, if everything works out.
The next race on the schedule is August 11th, a Sunday, a night race. So I guess it starts 6 o'clock, so it'll finish up at night in
Mhm.
Richmond. The last 4 races before the playoffs: Richmond, Michigan, Daytona, and then Darlington. September 1st is the last race for qualifying for the 2024 playoffs. Now, Rod, we know we got word today that Team AFP, in the form of you and your son Andrew, will be in
Mhm.
attendance covering the Bristol playoff race September 21st, a Saturday, and that's a Saturday
Mhm.
night down in Bristol and Thunder Valley.
Yeah.
The 7 o'clock, 7:30 start actually down there. So
Mhm.
we know you'll be there live in a couple of months. That's going to be exciting to be there for the third playoff race.
Yeah, it will be. And the atmosphere, especially at the night race at Bristol, is great anyway. But when it's the playoffs, it gets even better. You see a lot of jubilation from people that have made it that next cut to the next line of the playoffs and so forth. And then you see a lot of people that just simply walk away dejected. And I think of Matt DiBenedetto. I think before he lost his cup ride a couple of years ago, he lost it at Bristol. I mean, there was just proof right there. He was trying to go and try to continue on for the rest of the season. And although he did, he ended up losing his cup ride. And it was sad, but, he was crying. He was telling people, y'all deserve better than this. We've worked our tails off. He was leading that race, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, leading that race. And car just didn't have enough left to give. And he ended up losing that race. And so you see a lot of jubilation from some people. You see a lot of dejection, and then people that just don't want to be talked to when that race is over with, and especially at Bristol when tempers fly and so forth. You see a lot of people wanting to get in the golf carts and take off and head to the motorhomes because they just do not want to talk about Bristol and what it had of implications. I mean, we could very well be hearing about all those things coming up here over the next several weeks. But it'll all come to a head at Bristol. That's going to be one thing. And then the other thing about Richmond, we could very well be seeing Richmond off the schedule after this year because the talk is that the Richmond track hasn't made changes the way that at least the drivers or NASCAR has felt something that they've needed to make changes to. And they've got to make room for these for some of these tracks along the way that they're wanting to try to entice. And you see, they're also thinking about another date for that Chicago race. We're already dialed in. I think they're going to be going back to Chicago. But the question is getting a new date or getting another date. And then NASCAR is going to have to chip in. I think going to be several $1 million. NASCAR is going to have to chip in, and they are going to have to give to the city of Chicago for that race to come back. In addition to NASCAR having layoffs this past week, things may look good on the outside, but things are not good internally. I forget how many people they let go. Some are going to stay through to the end of the month.
Yeah, Rod, you're freezing up, but yeah, it is that time when we talked about this on the last several podcasts. The team owners are complaining about the financial pressures on them. We've talked about issues with there you go,
Oh,
you're
okay.
back. Yeah, you're back. We've talked about issues with team owners having
Yeah.
issues with money. We know that the Hooters sponsorship. What was that? Was that Hendrick?
Hendrick, yeah.
So I mean, some of the sponsors are having issues, NASCAR itself having issues. We just talked on
Mm-hmm.
this podcast about lots of empty seats in Indy. Yeah, it's there's economic realities for everybody. And that's that was definitely kind of surprising, not good news for NASCAR, that the people in the office felt obliged and felt it necessary to cut back the staff a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, Denny Hamlin made it. I think I was saying this before the weird thing happened right there. Denny Hamlin says they're no closer to the charter. They're no closer to coming up with a solution on the charter, although things have been painted rosy. Doesn't look that way going into it. And he says, this is going to be probably one of those things that's going to be down to the wire if it goes down to the wire. He just says that the two sides are far apart on where they need to be at on this charter.
Last thought, this just popped into my head as we were talking. We got this 2-week Olympic break coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Has there ever been discussion, to your knowledge, Rod, with all the years you've covered NASCAR, has there ever been discussion about having auto racing somehow in the Olympics? I can just imagine getting the stars of NASCAR, Formula One, Indy, the other various circuits across Europe and Asia and Australia, getting them all together, figuring out a way to do a standardized car so no one has necessarily an advantage. And let's just put, let's have a couple of guys or gals representing each country and go at it. They're out there on the track. Has there ever been talk about anything like that?
Not to my knowledge, there hasn't, but it's a great idea. It's not a bad idea putting them all in standardized cars, sort of like an IROC or something like that Superstar Racing Series that Tony Stewart did.
Yeah.
But putting them in some kind of car where at least the Formula One drivers, the IndyCar drivers, and the NASCAR drivers could all relate to one way or another a screen that's kind of universal or however you want it, but still something that's kind of a universal way of where all the cars are prepared, not by teams, but per se by an Olympic official, by Olympic officials, if they really wanted to do something like that. I think it would be great to have some kind of a street race, something that they could do, a street race. They could even do something, depending on where the Olympics are going to be at. They could probably put it on a track somewhere. It would be interesting. I'd love to see something like that, and we would finally see who is the better, athlete when it comes to driving a car. And there are people that swear up and down that the NASCAR drivers, they are the true athletes about it. There's others that say there's more thinking that goes into Formula One driving. Same thing for IndyCar. I don't know. It'd be great to see maybe a Kyle Larson, a Joseph Newgarden going against Lewis Hamilton and some of the others, and some of the other you have to almost throw Robbie Gordon into that too, because Robbie Gordon, he loves to race Baja. He loves to race in the deserts and stuff in these souped up trucks. They could pick from a variety of different people. I mean, hey, if they're going to put the golf teams on there, if they're going to put golf back in the Olympics and do that, I think, hey, why not include auto racing at least in that regard? But here's another one for you that kind of, I don't know, it kind of scares me. What if you go and you have these drivers and they get somebody picked and, they kind of get this thing of guaranteed they're going to win the race, or they think they're going to win the race because they're better than a Formula One driver, and they get skunked by everybody, sort of like what happened with Van Gisbergen when Chicago, when they race up there on the street race, and see how many of them come out crying, about as bad as Team USA almost came out crying in this. What was it? Who were they playing in basketball? And they were down.
South Sudan, yeah.
Yeah, South Sudan. I mean, they could have been playing, as far as I'm concerned, south part of Dickens and Wise County and stuff, and they'd probably been still beating them at that point. I don't know. I just don't see. I don't see that happening anytime soon. Of having, some kind of auto racing. I think it'd be great. I think it would be really great to have something like that.
They like to those Olympics people like to make money. This would be another way to make money. So maybe
Yeah,
I'll shoot an email to somebody, see if they
that'd be cool. That'd be cool.
All right. Well, Rod, we've got a little break coming up in the schedule here. So we'll get back together the week
Okay.
of leading up to the Richmond race. And for
Okay.
our listeners out there, hey, we're going to be watching the Olympics. Everybody's going to be watching, those sports we don't watch except for this time every 4 years, swimming and track and field. They're fun now, though.
Mhm.
But yeah, we'll catch up here in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, Rod, thanks for your time, your insight, and have a great week.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Chris.